take up item number 1 on our agenda, which is public comments. At this time, members of the public may comment on any item within our jurisdiction, but not on today's agenda. Is there anybody here wishing to speak during the public comment period? Okay, seeing none, close the public comment period, bring it back to the regular agenda. We will now take up item number 2, which is a request to approve the meeting minutes from the July 13th, 2017 meeting.
I move for approval.
Okay, have a motion by Mr. Britt.
I'll second that.
Second by Ms. Peterson. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, the same. Motion passes unanimously. And got to be enthusiastic when you pass those meeting minutes. Now we'll move on to item number 3, which is a request to review and accept the cash shortage report for fiscal year 2016-2017. Good morning.
Morning, members of the committee. My name is Tara Freitas. I'm the Chief of Financial Reporting and Audits. Is this close enough? Can you hear me all right?
Maybe move the mic a little closer.
Tara Freitas, the Chief of Financial Reporting and Audits. I'll be presenting to you this morning on the cash shortages that occurred during the 16-17 fiscal year. I'd like to start off by apologizing for the confusion of the drafts of those reports and point out one item. There'll be a subsequent draft of this report, the final, sent out today to correct 4 from the bottom, the RMA Permit Center at Government Plaza. That should actually read $100, not $300. So I apologize for the confusion. The $300 was mixed up with the item that you'll hear later today. And that shortage of $300 was actually from the prior year. So just that one correction from 3 to 1, which also changes the total down to 344. So the county cash manual requires that departments notify our office immediately if there's a cash shortage or overage of $10 or more discovered. And subsequently, we are required to present the shortages to the audit committee annually. So in accordance with the provision, we have summarized these 11 shortages reported to our office in the past fiscal year, and they are in the table before you. As I just mentioned, the total of these amounts is $344, and they were incurred by General Services, HHSA, and RMA. The first of these shortages listed, the $20 at Balch Park, was actually found 3 days later. We still include it as the reported shortage because it was missing for the weekend and showed up 3 days later. The other items, the remaining 10, were not recovered. In comparison with the 15-16 fiscal year, both the number of departments and the number of incidents both decreased. In 15-16, there were 14 shortages that occurred, and these occurred across 5 departments and totaled $610.84. In addition to these shortages listed on the table, there's also 2 overages that I should mention to you. These totaled $30 and were incurred by General Services. One at Balch Park for $10 on October 24th, 2016, and the other at Cutler Park of $20 on April 17th, 2017. When our department is notified of these overages and shortages, we consider a variety of factors as to whether or not we actually do an audit to look into the details surrounding the incidents and decide to do an engagement. These include the last time that we've actually gone out to the department through any type of engagement to review the internal controls, and also the details surrounding their particular incident. I should also note that when we do these engagements, we're really focusing on just improving the internal controls. So not necessarily trying to pinpoint exactly what happened, but while that's part of our review, and in order to make sure it's a learning experience that they don't have a similar shortage, if there's internal controls that can be strengthened. During the past fiscal year, our office conducted one of these shortages, and that was on the RMA shortage. That report will be presented to you later this morning. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions from committee members?
I'm just curious what kind of, sort of just in general, what kind of small errors you're finding or are being reported to you that
Sure,
cause
yeah.
some of these. Is just sort of miscounting or
The majority that we hear are just errors in making change, so that they maybe gave a 20 and they thought that they gave a 10, or vice versa. That's really the majority of the incidents here. There's also a couple, like you'll hear about later, where there was one incident that they believed that the money was actually thrown away in the trash when they were switching envelopes and not maybe transferring the money to the new envelope that they put the receipt in, and then maybe they threw away the old envelope with some of the cash. There's also one of them, actually, the only one on here that wasn't actually tangible cash was the HHSA Vital Stats for 27, and that was a credit card charge that was mistakenly charged $1 instead of 28. And the last item that was something other than just a cash making error was the HHSA Farmersville. According to this memo, a student was covering the employee during the employee's lunch break, and it looked like the drawer had been tampered with, and then the student left, and the $10 was discovered to have been missing. And I think it was a student that was done with their internship, so wasn't coming back. So that's what we were reporting on that one. So, yeah, I guess they took $10 for their services.
Well, and they must have had a real nice meal in Farmersville with $10.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Well, and I was just going to make the comment that clearly the effort is working when you're focusing on what is happening and causing these shortfalls so that you can prevent it, and with adequate training or changes in a department to reduce the occurrence the following year, which is evidenced by the 15 shortage amount compared to what we had this last year. So good job. You guys are doing a good job in the auditor's office, and glad to see what the new team's going to continue to do. So any other questions or comments? All right. That was a request to accept this. Do we need a motion for that or not?
Yes, I believe you do need a motion.
Okay. The chair will entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion to accept the report.
Thank you, Ms. Peterson. Second by Mr. Spot. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, the same. Motion passes unanimously. We're next going to move on to item number 4, a request to review and accept the probation department head change consulting report, the most exciting item on our agenda today.
Good morning. My name is Kelsey Gubbins. I'm an accountant auditor too, and I was the lead auditor for the probation department head change consulting engagement. Before I get into the results of the report, I would like to quickly go over what department head change consulting engagements are and why we are required to do them. So per government code, department head change consulting engagements are required to be performed when a county department head leaves a position. The main purpose of these engagements is to provide management with an assessment of internal controls over the transfer of assets in other areas as they relate to the change in department head. With that said, I will now go over the results of the engagement. First of all, I'd like to mention the areas that the department excelled in, which are outlined at the bottom of page 1 of the report. The cash memos, the authorization to sign the statement of fees form, and the inventory of personal property were all submitted timely. The department's 2 change funds selected for testing were counted and reconciled without exception. The prior department head's personal assets were returned and access was removed timely. The prior department head submitted her Form 700 timely and filled out the form properly. The current department head also submitted her Form 700 timely. However, there was an error discovered by the department after it was submitted, but the error was later corrected and the form was resubmitted without exception. The first month of credit card expenditures incurred by the current department head adhered to all applicable policies. The prior department head's last timesheet and benefits payout were tested without exception. The current department head's first timesheet and new pay rate were tested without exception. And then finally, all 15 cash receipts selected for testing were deposited timely. So the department only had one finding in relation to cash handling, which was comprised of 5 different elements. So first of all, one employee not only has the key to the cash difference fund box, but also has the safe combination where the box is stored. So this poses an issue because full access to cash should be limited wherever possible. We recommended that the department restrict the key to the cash difference fund box to an employee who doesn't also have the safe combination. So this would essentially require 2 employees to be present when accessing cash. So only collusion would have to occur in order to bypass these controls. And per the department's management response, the department has since retrieved that key and gave it to another employee who does not also have the safe combination. Next item, 2 employees share the cash register change fund and do not count and reconcile the cash before changing hands. This poses an issue because no accountability is established if cash were to go missing. So we recommended that the department do one of 2 things. They could either designate a primary cashier and a secondary cashier to cover for breaks and lunch, and then in which case cash should be counted, reconciled, and signed off on by both cashiers before cash changes hands. Or if the department chooses to, they could split the change fund into sub-funds so that multiple employees could collect cash at the same time without compromising those internal controls over cash. So per the department's management response, the department chose to designate a primary and a secondary cashier, and they implemented a form to be completed and signed off on when cash changes hands. Next, the department's $20 change fund designated for live scan fingerprinting hasn't been utilized in over 2 years. Therefore, we recommended that the department reassess the need for this change fund and then take the appropriate procedures to close the change fund if it's no longer needed. Per the department's management response, the department has since taken the necessary steps and the change fund has now been closed. Last of all, we found that documentation for the establishment and authorization of the department's $80 cash register change fund and the $20 live scan fingerprinting change fund could not be located. So with that said, we recommended that they reestablish the cash register change funds with the auditor controller's office in order to obtain that documentation. And per their management response, the department has since taken these necessary steps and the change fund has been reestablished and documentation has been obtained. So as you can see, the department implemented all of the recommendations from the report, so we'd like to commend them for taking such quick action. Also, I'd like to thank Michelle Bonwell and her staff for all of their efforts during the engagement and for being so easy to work with. So that concludes the results of the probation department head change consulting engagement. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Nice job, Michelle. Maybe you should go have a nice conversation with our DA, Mr. Tim Ward, and talk to him about how to interact with the auditor's office. Anyone else have any additional? I got to throw him out there. I mean, Tim's not here. He can't defend himself. Why not throw it out? Anybody have any questions or comments?
I had one question. You talk about the Form 700 being filed timely, but also being filled out correctly. Who makes that determination? How do you make that determination?
With the Form 700, there comes an instruction sheet, and basically we come up with a list of attributes that we look for whenever we're reviewing the form, and we make sure that all of those aspects are met. And then Form 700 should be filed 30 days. When the prior department leaves, it should be filed 30 days after that they leave, and then 30 days before the current department head. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Just a comment. Would you mind providing a copy of that to the county counsel's office when you get a chance?
Yes.
Any additional questions or comments? Would HHSA like a copy too?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
I could ask for it. It's a public document. No, I'm just kidding.
All right, thank you very much. We have a request in front of us, and Chair will entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion to accept the probation department head change consulting report.
Second.
All right, I have a motion by Ms. Peterson, second by Mr. Britt. All those in favor, please.
Aye.
Up. I am so good about public comment. You know that, Jennifer. Okay. Is there any public comment at this time related to this? Anybody from probation wanted to? Okay. All right. Seeing no public comment, we will bring it back to the vote. The motion and second still stand. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. Motion passes unanimously. All right. We are now going to continue on and take up item number 5, which is a request to review and accept the RMA Department Head Change Consulting Report.
Morning, my name is Justin Avila. I'm the Principal Accountant Auditor, and today I'll be going over the Department Head change for the Resource Management Agency, which I will refer to as agency from here on. So Kelsey gave you the background on why we do Department Head changes, so I'll jump right into the conclusion and get to the results. So the agency's prior department head separated from the position in February of 2017, and the current department head was appointed a few days later. So based on our testing, we found the agency excels in several areas. So we counted the cash difference fund and one change fund, and they were counted without exception. The personal assets assigned to the prior department head were returned timely. Both the prior and current department heads submitted 700 form timely, and the current department head's first time sheet and new pay rate were tested without exception. However, we found some weaknesses in the agency's internal controls, which are noted in findings A through F. So finding A, documents not sent timely. Typically, our office is notified in advance of a department head leaving that we're able to get the outgoing department head packet. And so on this one, we weren't notified until the day before the prior department head's last day. And then also our office wasn't notified that the current department head was appointed until 7 days later. So therefore, the outgoing department head cash memo was sent to us 17 days late, and the incoming department head cash memo was sent to us 14 days late. And then the authorization to sign statement of fees form was sent 10 days late. And lastly, the inventory of personal property was filed 6 days late. The recommendation for that was when the agency becomes aware of department head change leaving, to let our office know as soon as possible. That way we can get them the documents that need to be sent to us timely. And to prevent a lapse of accountability over assets, required documents should be sent to us by the specific deadline. So on to finding B, deposits not made timely. We tested 6 cash receipts in our sample, or 37.5% that were not deposited timely. 5 were deposited 1 day late. 1 was deposited 2 days late. And you'll see it on the bottom of page 3, there's a table from the Tulare County Cash Manual with the deposit frequency guidelines. So if departments don't follow the deposit frequency guidelines, there's an increased likelihood of taxpayers' dollars being misappropriated or misplaced. We recommend the department adhere to the deposit frequency guidelines. Management response was policies and procedures regarding the frequency of deposits for cash and checks to the county treasury were discussed internally. So on to finding C, late payment for the credit card. The current department head's credit card statement was paid 49 days late. Payments are considered timely if they're mailed within 30 days of the statement date. The county could incur late fees and interest charges and also damage the county's reputation. We recommend the department mail the payments within 30 days of the statement date, and then ensure the documents attached to the support and AFIN are all there. That way the approval process is quicker. Management response on that. The agency acknowledged that the late payments could potentially result in late fees and interest charges, and they've discussed it with staff internally.
Justin, real quick question on that. So if the county were to incur fees, penalties, or late interest charges, do we have any policy to penalize the individual who can cause those fees, or is that not something that's possible? I mean,
I don't believe so.
I was just curious.
You mean for like late credit card fees or something like
Yeah,
that?
I mean,
you could discipline your employee for it in terms of recovering the money.
Yeah.
It would probably fall to the department head's personal responsibility if he wanted to take that position because, it was allowed to be incurred
Yeah.
without beyond policy. We've never done that before, and it's probably something that should be discussed if we were going to consider doing that.
Yeah, I'm just curious. I didn't know if we had any kind of policy that would basically punish or disincentivize that sort of activity.
Well, certainly the employee who's responsible for hitting those deadlines, that would be a performance issue that could be, dealt with in the disciplinary context.
Sure.
Continuing this discussion, Justin, let's move towards cancellation of the credit card. What is the policy with regard to cancellation? Is that done by the credit card company, purchasing, or that action is taken?
I believe it's purchasing, right?
I don't know the exact details, but I know that in purchasing's credit card guidelines, they do list the disciplinary actions that would take place. And I know they just recently changed those. I can send out a copy later today to the committee. I believe the final one is to ultimately take the card. I think it starts on a different level, and then finally they take the card.
Or misuse.
I believe so.
Yeah, misuse, and I would think that
Not
those could be.
misuse, just lateness of the payment. Is that a grounds for the cancellation of the card, or is that a credit card company action that's taken? I say it not without some foundation.
Yeah, I can send you what the policy actually says to the committee if you're interested. But no, I don't think that that's actually the lateness isn't really addressed in policy.
Because those fees can significantly add up. I mean, it's something that we should, if we don't have anything in place. I mean, at a minimum, to me, I think that if payments are not made timely, and I know that it's really it's small dollars when you compare it to a department's budget in its entirety. However, I do think that if there are unnecessary charges to that department because of a failure of a department head or an employee to properly follow procedures, it should at a minimum be deducted from their budget. I mean, that's just my general thought. You talk about misuse of taxpayer dollars. I mean, you don't pay your bills on time. In real life, if you don't pay your bills you don't pay your personal bills on time, do you get forgiveness? I don't think so. That credit card company is going to hold you accountable. So we as a county, when our employees are acting on behalf of the county, if they do not pay their bills timely, they should be held accountable as well.
So county council can provide you with a memo showing what the potential internal policies and procedures are available to address something like that, and
Sure.
whether there are any legal issues that would be involved, including whether or not a department head could be held responsible or other options to get that paid.
Yeah, I'd be interested in that.
Okay.
And my question is about submitted versus paid. So in this case, you're saying the cause was the credit card payment was not entered into AFIN timely. But I know there's other cases where it is submitted timely and still paid late because of the auditor's way of reviewing line by line and not reviewing the whole invoice at once. Is that correct?
Well, we do the check runs once a week, so that could be part of it. So it's something that your submitter would have to be aware of entering those. Anything submitted by Friday, though, is approved timely, so it wouldn't necessarily be our office. And we've actually done a lot of analysis as to the payments that aren't timely and what the hang-up is, really trying to figure out if we can pinpoint what the true issue is. And I can assure you that the auditor's office is approving them with a day, most scenarios, and at most 2. So with payments having to be in Friday, that would be ample time to have them still make the Wednesday check run.
Chairman, members of this committee, I think this discussion is very relevant and it's timely because I'm becoming aware of credit cards statements not being paid, and cancellations. And I know that the credit card policy has recently been circulated. I know it's been formally adopted yet, but I know it's been circulated. So maybe it's high time when we put this on our agenda, to look at the credit card policy in all its various dimensions,
I would suggest also we look at the credit card process,
including the process.
because that's important as well. But yeah, I agree.
Sorry to interrupt you.
Sorry.
We deviated for
I was just-
quite a while. Hopefully you didn't lose your train of thought, Justin.
Very good.
Thank you, Justin.
I do have one other.
Not done deviating. Leave it to an attorney.
You know, this issue of vacation credit and a department head and required to work. And, you know, so I'm
Coming up on finding E,
yeah,
right?
what?
That's finding E, right? We're coming up to that.
F.
E or F?
Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
You want me to go through?
No, go ahead.
Okay. So finding D, that was access not removed timely. So the 3 out of the 9 types of access tested were not removed timely. The first one, AT&T cell phone and tablet plans were canceled 18 days late, and the AFN access was terminated 5 days late. So all access should be removed prior to department head's last day or immediately thereafter. The cause for the AT&T plan, or the request to cancel the AT&T phone plan and tablet was sent 17 days late, and the request was nullified or fulfilled the next day. Neither the cell phone plan nor the tablet plan were utilized by the agency during the entire 18-day duration. And then although it's stated in the outgoing department head change memo to request to deactivate the outgoing department head's AFN access, the agency never sent that request. And the county incurred an approximate expense of $49 in regards to the AT&T cell phone and tablet plans. And there's also potential for unauthorized activity to occur in regards to the AFN access not being timely or removed timely. So the agency, our recommendation was the agency make sure that all access is removed prior to the employee's last day. So finding E, incorrect use of vacation credit when a holiday falls on a Friday. So the agency's use of vacation credit for exempt employees when a holiday falls on a Friday is not implemented in compliance with the county personnel rules. The majority of the agency's exempt employees work 9 hours Monday through Thursday and 4 hours on Friday. And when a holiday falls on a Friday, exempt employees who work 4 hours on Friday are paid 40 hours for the work week and also receive an additional 4 hours of vacation credit, totaling 44 hours for the work week. Per the HR&D director, a memo in response to how an exempt employee should record a holiday leave if a holiday falls on a Friday, Personnel Rule 6.6.1 holiday states, regardless of an employee's scheduled hours, holiday leave for each holiday is 8 hours. An employee would record 8 hours of paid holiday leave, 8 regular hours on the timesheet, and no vacation credit, as credit is associated with the holiday falling on a Saturday or an employee's scheduled day off, if that day off is Monday through Friday. By incorrectly crediting vacation hours, employees receive extra vacation to which they are not entitled, resulting in unnecessary liability for the county. So assuming all 32 of the agency's current exempt employees who work 4 hours on a Friday receive 12 hours of vacation credit, we approximate the liability to the county to be $15,820 for the calendar year 2016 at the current employee salary rates, not including the county's liability for payroll taxes and retirement contributions. We recommend the agency going forward should adhere to all applicable county personnel rules and guidelines or guidance, and then if they need to seek any guidance from HRD, if they have any questions, to contact HRD for guidance. Agency's response was HR and payroll staff were made aware of the misinterpretation of the county personnel rules, and they will adhere to all applicable personnel rules. Management will notify exempt employees of the procedure change. And then also this week we received an email that RMA is adjusting their schedules when a holiday falls on a Friday.
Can I ask a question now?
Yes, you may.
Is this, sorry, Mr. Chairman, is this not something that that software could be programmed to make sure that it's being done properly countywide?
I think there's been an issue with several departments, and some departments adjust the schedule that week to work the 8. Instead of working 9 hours, adjust it 8 Monday through Thursday, and then they would have the 8 hours on the holiday for Friday.
Right, so they're changing the FLSA work week to account for the holiday, but is there not a way in the software itself to be able to catch that?
The issue really is that there are permitted scenarios where vacation crediting is allowable, and so in order to kind of turn that off, it really is just one of those depends on each
Case by case.
So there's no there's no way you can just kind of turn off that vacation crediting line and have that not be an option to anyone, because there's times where it is allowable.
Okay.
Not in a way it was used for those Friday holidays.
Okay, all right. So it seems to me like if it's an unusual situation, that you could do an administrative override on a case-by-case basis, but otherwise capture countywide, because this is a countywide, it was a countywide issue. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, this discussion is also very good. What I'm concerned about is whether this is an isolated instance of misinterpretation or miscalculation, or it's systemic. And you would know that because you didn't conduct a comprehensive review. So I'm wondering, let's put another item on the agenda here to see how the departments are doing, and so that we don't catch this every time there's an audit and have needless criticism when we could have corrected it at the threshold.
Mr. Chair, I can tell you this is a systemic issue because it happens in HHSA. Because my question was going to be on the appendix that you relied on to make your determination that was dated in 2014 to Oscar Garcia. Was that circulated to the department heads? Because talking with some of my department head friends, perhaps there was because of turnover, or even myself, I'm not sure if even some department heads were aware of that clarification being provided. And if it was only provided to the auditor's office and not to the department heads, I think that's unfair.
Yeah, so where is Oscar anyways?
Oscar's
Yes.
gone.
Okay.
Exactly. No, it wasn't shared with the department head, and it's something we became aware of. Had this opportunity now to go see what was happening in the departments. We found this, and I think it's a great suggestion.
I just think it's unfair to be having an audit exception when department heads were not aware that they were perhaps misinterpreting rules that have been in place since 2001.
I guess I would say as part of the audit process, this is one way that we can help get everyone on the same page. So.
On ESPN, that's an appropriate.
I understand it's just, but it's one thing to be doing something because that was the history of doing it, because that's how it was interpreted in 2001 when you had different HR directors versus what's happening today. And I think that's where some of the confusion comes in, particularly in some of the larger agencies, is that sort of just making sure that information is being shared to everyone.
I would also, yes, I agree. I would also add we've had payroll training recently, and we will continue to do trainings to try to get, diverse departments, a number of departments, to try to get everyone on the same page. We are committed to working with departments.
No, I understand that. I'm still not sure I agree with the rule.
I know you don't. I would say we don't make that rule,
but you don't make the rules.
We will try to help everyone
understand it.
Thank you.
By the same token, if I may, if there appears to be some difficulty with the rule through this process, I think it's incumbent upon us maybe to make a suggestion to reform the rule.
Yes.
If it's not really being applied easily and effectively.
Right.
Exercise over vacation and credit cards here, because we hear it all the time.
Right.
Through this process, not only would we like to see corrections made, but maybe we could see some strategic reform so that we reduce the degree of error and also provide a more effective operation. That's a speech.
I agree with what you said.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, Justin, another divergence from what you were
Right.
talking about. Go ahead, continue on.
So I think we're on to
And by the way, Mike's an attorney by trade too, so that's part of the reason it took as long as it did.
And an exercise attorney too.
So, on to finding F, incorrect use of vacation credit when a department head works on a holiday. So on this one, the prior department head received 8 hours of vacation credit for working 5 hours on Veterans Day in 2016. This is not in accordance with county personnel rules regarding vacation credit when working on a holiday. Per the county personnel rules, if a department head was required to work on a holiday, he or she is entitled to receive 1 hour of vacation for each hour worked, up to a maximum of 8 hours. And then the term required, so if there's a specific exception described in the county personnel rules which requires the department head to work, for example, responding to an emergency, special circumstances requiring a board resolution, or being called to work as a disaster service worker, the department head should be credited 1 hour vacation for each hour worked, up to maximum of 8 hours. So if she is not required to work on Veterans Day, or if he was not required to work on Veterans Day, then no vacation hours should have been credited. The effect for that, the county faces unnecessary liability when the department head receives vacation credit for working on a holiday when he was not required to work. And in the instance of 8 hours of vacation credit that the prior department head received for Veterans Day, the county faced a minimum liability of $212 if he was required, and up to a maximum liability of $566 if he was not required, based on his base salary rate, not including the county's liability for payroll taxes and retirement contributions. So going forward, we recommend that the agency should adhere to all applicable county personnel rules and verify whether the department head was required to work on a holiday, and if not required to work on a holiday, then ensure that the sum of the department head's hours worked do not exceed a total of 40 hours in the single work week. The agency agreed with the recommendation, and they've notified HR and payroll staff of the county personnel rules and will adhere to all applicable personnel rules. And based on the time card, the prior department head was not required to work on that holiday. So as a result of findings D and F, a memo was sent out to all department heads and payroll clerks, since there are a few departments where I think this issue of interpreting the rule is departments are handling this different. And I'd like to thank RMA and Mr. Shanky and his staff for their work on this audit, and that concludes my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Any
Mr.
further
Chairman,
questions or comments?
I do have a statement in this last one. So how do you determine whether a department head was required to work? Who's going to make that decision? Are we going to have a hearing in front of the CAO or the Board of Supervisors? I mean, to me, the word required is very much like the word suffered in the FLSA, and I think it's a situation where it's a rule so that an employee can't put themselves on duty, or something along those lines. But to me, a department head is a different issue because, I mean, really they are autonomous, and if they're elected, even more so. I mean, how do you make that determination? I question whether that's the intent behind this rule, particularly because a department head could, answer a few emails and get paid for a full day anyway. So, I mean, I really question this interpretation.
Would you like to respond to that question?
I don't. It's weird. I think it's just HR policy.
We reached out to HR and county council, but basically, yeah, I completely agree. I think the word required is really difficult. It's something that we talked about internally. It's a difficult situation because obviously, like you said, an employee would have someone above them requiring them to come in, and so we agree. It's a difficult, but I think in this case, it's just something that we felt amiss to not point out that there's potentially extra hours out there that the liability on the payout for his timesheet had extra hours that, according to the current interpretations of the personnel rules, didn't seem to be accurate.
I'm glad we all agree. That's nice.
and see how the departments are misapplying or misconstruing maybe a policy that needs to be revised.
Yep. So let's get that addressed. I don't know if we need to have HR here to be a part of that, or what the avenue forward, if that's a board resolution to take up the item. However we need to do that, I think it's appropriate to move forward that way.
Okay, and I'll talk to Rhonda about it.
Okay.
So if I may suggest.
Sure.
Have your internal discussions, but bring the matter for this committee when you've thoroughly thought it through, so that we can meaningfully look at it and then maybe refer to the department head meeting and then ultimately to the board, or whatever you suggest, legal.
Yeah, I mean, it's the issue that's really going to raise its head when we do this sort of an analysis is whether or not the county of Tulare wants to go to a public accountability system.
Is that a PASS system?
A public accountability system is a
I'm
situation.
just kidding. The acronym's PASS.
Okay. A public accountability system is basically treating your exempt employees on an hourly basis. So if they work 6 hours a day and their schedule is 8, they would have to take 2 hours of vacation pay in order to get paid for that day. They would be required to. But on the next day, if they worked 12 hours, it wouldn't matter. They would only get paid for 8. So, it's on the one hand, it's public accountability for the taxpayer dollars, but on the other hand, it's going to be a real morale killer, to treat exempt employees that way. So, I mean, that is the slippery slope that you're getting on when you're talking about these kinds of issues.
Is this all exempt employees or only department heads?
All exempt employees.
I think some of the issue boils down to how we have different schedules. So some agencies or departments work only half-day schedule on a Friday. So it kind of feels funny to put 8 hours holiday on a Friday when you're really not ever in the office an 8 hours on Friday. And then the question raises, are you flexing the holiday or are you flexing work hours? Which, of course, under the current personnel rules, you get 8 hours, 1 day. So, and then on HHSA's perspective, we have mandate requirements with the state to be open non-traditional work hours. And in order to accomplish that, we have to have alternative work schedules. So there's a lot of complications that I think when these personnel rules were put in place didn't exist, and our world has changed, or perhaps we need to figure out how we interpret them more effectively. I'm not sure if that's the right word. But I think that's some of the issue too, is sort of, I feel like the 9-4, like with Government Plaza having to close at noon on Fridays, that's being treated more as an alternative work schedule when it's really the standard schedule set by the Board of Supervisors. And does that make any difference in the way we interpret things or do things? So I mean, I think the discussion is timely, but it's just sort of, those are some of the
All right, and I just think treating department heads differently, because let's hope we have a department head who is checking their emails every day. And, to punish them to save, $20, I mean, you may not know there's an emergency unless you're checking your emails or something along those lines. So I think department heads are a different carve-out.
Yes.
And they should have different expectations about that, even if it means crediting them an hour of pay. We have a 300-hour vacation cap and all of that. We have other mechanisms to address it if it becomes a problem. So, okay. With that, I have no more comments.
Welcome to continue if you would like. I mean, you've been doing a great job.
Move for approval before we can digress any further.
All right. Great job, Deanne. Thanks for showing your expertise. Great job, Justin. All right, this is an action item, and Chair will entertain a motion.
I'll make that motion.
And the dialogue continues from
Second.
Deanne. We have a motion from Ms. Peterson, a second from Mr. Britt. Any public comment before we vote? I saw you pointing that pin at me. Seeing no public comment, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. Motion passes unanimously. All right, next we're going to move on to review and accept the RMA cash shortage audit report. You just really like RMA, don't you, Justin?
Yes, yeah, I got
Good.
lucky one. I got 2 today. So I'll be going over the cash shortage audit report for the Resource Management Agency, and I'll continue to call it the agency from here on. So as Tara mentioned earlier, we decided to do a cash shortage or overage audit after review the frequency, the amount, and the last time internal controls over cash were reviewed. So the purpose of this cash shortage audit was to address the adequacy of internal controls as they relate to a particular shortage or shortages in an attempt to strengthen the agency's internal controls over cash. So I'll give you a brief background on the agency's cash collection sites. So they have the Visalia Permit Center. They collect payments for building and land use permits and utility payments, and this is the only location that makes change for cash-paying customers. They have 3 change drawers and 1 cash difference fund, and then they also have the Porterville Permit Center. They collect payments for building and land use permits. However, they only accept exact payments only. And then the Terabella Road Yard, they collect payments for utilities, and they also accept only exact payments. And then in the table on top of page 2, we give you a table on the cash collections for the fiscal year 2016. So the total for the year were roughly $517,000, and we broke it down to the daily cash collection, average out to roughly $2,000 a day. So the scope of our audit focused on 2 instances where cash shortages occurred. The first one, there was a $300 shortage that occurred on April 15, 2016, and the second one was the cash shortage of $100 that occurred on December 16, 2016. So the cash shortage of $300 that occurred on April 15, 2016 at the Visalia Permit Center, management was not able to determine how or when the cash went missing. The employee who had the shortage remembers collecting $327.50 from the only cash-paying customer that day. At the end of the day, the employee remembers counting the cash collected for the day and notifying coworkers that the amount reconciled without exception. The cash and receipts were then placed in a cash box that was handed to the fiscal employee responsible for securing the cash box in the safe overnight. However, it was noted that the cash box used that day was not properly safeguarded because the locking mechanism was broken and could not be locked. The cash shortage was discovered the following business day after fiscal staff retrieved the box from the safe to prepare the deposit. And the cash shortage of $100 that occurred on December 16, the employee who had the shortage believes that the money was accidentally thrown away in the trash. When the employee collected the money, the employee remembers counting the correct amount and putting the money into an envelope and sealing the envelope. The employee forgot to include the receipt in the envelope, so tore it open, grabbed the money out to transfer the money into a new envelope, and believes he left a $100 bill in and threw it in the trash. The cash shortage was discovered when the fiscal staff opened the envelope under dual control to reconcile the cash and payments for the payments received at the Porterville Permit Center. So the conclusion, we found that the agency has improved in some areas, including enhancing their policies and procedures, providing staff with additional training. They created the agency cash handling manual. However, we found some weaknesses in agency's internal controls, which are noted in findings A through D. Finding A, not all employees were familiar with policies and procedures. 3 of the 5 employees interviewed were unaware of the existence of either the Tulare County Cash Manual or even their own agency cash manual. Management's response was that new employees will be familiarized with written policies and procedures, and existing employees will receive a refresher annually. The agency continues to seek cost-effective professional training for staff. Finding B, funds are not always being properly safeguarded. We noted that there was $25 in a bag that was set aside to be taken to the county treasurer for change. The bag was unsecured at the employee's cubicle. Also, keys to the agency's cash drawers are not kept in a secure location. Cash drawer keys are kept at the cashier's desk, and then the desk is not the drawer is not being locked when the cashier steps away from their desk. Management response to policies and procedures emphasizing the importance of safeguarding cash were discussed internally. Finding C, commingling and lack of accountability of change funds. 2 of the agency's change funds are being commingled. We recommend to keep the funds separate and verify the cash, the change at each change in custody. Management response, they order an additional locking bag, and each cashier will have the locking bag to hold their contents of their drawer separately overnight in the safe. Finding D, lack of management approval for voids. Employees responsible for collecting cash were also involved in voiding transactions without management approval. There's a potential for cashiers to take the cash from the daily cash receipts and void the supporting records to hide the theft. Agency's response was the supervisor or designee will witness the void and record it in a void log maintained by each cashier. Subsequently, a report will be generated from PALMS and reconciled to the void log. So on to the Porterville Permit Center. Finding A, there's similar findings here. Funds are not always being properly safeguarded. The agency's cash store is not always being locked when not in use. Management stressed the importance of safeguarding and handling cash with the staff. So finding B, improper segregation of cash drawers. Agency does not have a separate cash drawer for each employee who handles cash at the Porterville Permit Center. The management response was they have since ordered a compact depository safe, and it was installed at the Porterville Permit Center. It's also a dual control. There's 4 combinations. Each employee has 2 numbers to the combination. And then on finding C, no sign visible. There was no sign posted notifying customers to ask for a receipt if one is not provided. They have since posted the sign. And then finding D, lack of management approval for voids. Same thing with if I say a permit center, a supervisor or designee will witness the void and record it in a void log maintained by each cashier. And then subsequently the report will be reconciled to the void log. I'd like to thank RMA and Mr. Shanky and his staff for their work on this audit, and that concludes my presentation. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
So I'm finally connecting the 2 dots. I know why there was that $100 overage in cash in the solid waste department, because that solid waste employee found the envelope and opened it and got the $100, and he went and he turned it into the cash box, right?
Yeah.
The same honesty that was displayed by the RMA employee that accidentally threw the $100 bill in the trash, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, any questions or comments from committee members or members of the public? This is your time before Jennifer mandates it.
I would like
All right.
to know one. Karen
Sure.
mentioned to us that I guess they're pulling wire right now to install cameras at the Visalia Permit Center.
Oh, great. That's another good thing. That's a great internal control. I have those internal controls at my residence as well.
I'd make a motion to approve.
I have a motion from Mr. Britt,
I'll second
a
that.
second from Ms. Peterson. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, the same. Motion passes unanimously. All right, next we're going to move on to item 7, which is a request to review and accept the TCICT Asset Cycle First Follow-Up Audit Report.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Izaso. I'm an accountant auditor too at the Auditor Controller's Office. I conducted the initial audit of TCICT Asset Cycle as well as its follow-up audit, which we will be discussing today. Before going over our findings, just want to briefly discuss what we do in our follow-up audit. Our main objective is to determine whether the department implemented the recommendations in our initial audit. And we conduct these audits in accordance with auditing standards. And as part of our procedures, we conducted interviews to gather information, obtained supporting documentation, and performed testing as applicable. So TCICT's asset cycle audit was conducted in January 2016, and we identified 15 findings, which resulted in 15 recommendations to improve TCICT's control over the asset cycle. Our follow-up audit found that of the 15 recommendations, 11 were implemented and 4 were not implemented. And we'll go over each one in detail in a few minutes. Please note that we'll conduct a second follow-up audit no sooner than 6 months to verify, to review the status of the 4 that are not implemented. So let's start with finding A, which is lack of capital asset identification and control. In our initial audit, we found that TCICT was not in full compliance with the county policy. It is the county policy to properly identify assets over $5,000 using tag numbers. And we noted some exceptions in our testing. So as a result, we recommended the TCICT to review and confirm that all their assets have tag numbers. In our follow-up audit, we did a test of 25 assets and noted that one asset could not be located, and 4 assets neither had visible tag numbers nor serial numbers. We also checked to verify whether 4 of the assets that we identified as exceptions in our initial audit were corrected. And based on our testing, 2 assets which were identified by their serial numbers did not have visible tag numbers, and therefore were not corrected. You'll see a table on page 2 if you want more information on the asset. And because our testing identified 6 assets that did not have proper identification, we considered that the recommendation was not implemented. According to the management response, TCICT has assigned staff to the project of implementing the process of tagging capital assets, and the anticipated completion date for this project is June 2018. Finding B, inventory of personal property different from the fixed asset system, or FAS. For everyone's information, the inventory of personal property is a report that purchasing sends out annually to departments to confirm existence of the assets. The department had reviews and signs this report and files it with the purchasing agent and the county clerk recorder. In our initial audit, we noted in our comparison of this report and the fixed asset system that one asset had a tag number, which is different in both reports. And as a result, we recommended TCICT review its inventory and make sure that assets listed in the report and all other information are correct. And if adjustments need to be done, then they will have to let purchasing know. In our follow-up audit, we noted that TCICT now verifies existing information in FAS on a regular basis and verifies whether requests of changes are made. And because TCICT developed a process to correct the finding, we considered the recommendation to be implemented. Finding C, lack of control on sensitive assets. In our initial audit, we found that TCICT does not have inventory of assets valued at less than $5,000. It is a county policy that county departments track these kind of assets. In our follow-up audit, we noted that TCICT is working on asset management project, which is planned to keep track of assets valued at less than $5,000. And TCICT has assigned a project manager dedicated solely to work on this project. Anticipated completion date for this project is June 2018.
Just a quick question. Sorry to interrupt right there. With the completion date of June of 18, I mean, is there any investigation into the timeliness of this being implemented? I mean, I know that there might be a sticker shortage out there or something, but I mean, tagging assets to me, you know, I get if they have to tag every iPhone charger in the county. Yeah, it might take a little bit of time, be a little more onerous and difficult to do, but some of these larger dollar items, you would think that they could be tagged rather quickly and should be a high priority. When you get into these recommendations, do you set any timeliness requirement for a department to implement?
We don't set like a timeliness requirement for now.
Right.
But we'll, like when we do our second follow-up audit, we'll make sure that it's done.
I mean, essentially, you go back in 6 months, more or less 6 months, right? So, in theory, you have 6 months to implement your recommendation before you come back the second time to see that you've done it or not. So, although it may not be sort of stated, you kind of have a 6 month-ish window depending on when you get for the second cycle, right?
Yeah, and I had a question on this too. So we're saying that they don't have any inventory of the assets, and this is an asset that is individually under $5,000. So conceptually, do we have any idea what the cumulative total of these uninventoried assets are?
No, we don't have an idea of like the total. But these are like the projectors and monitors that are
iPhones,
less than
iPads,
$5,000.
all of those things.
Yeah.
Laptops, and a lot of the items that are more susceptible to that, really.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I'm wondering. Okay, thank you.
Sorry.
Oh, no problem. So in our follow-up audit, we noted that there is an asset management project that they're working on to keep track of these assets. So finding D, lack of adequate actions to address theft. In our initial audit, we noted that TCICT had an incident of theft in April 2015. The incident happened over the weekend when an employee's car was broken into and his laptop was stolen. The employee reported the incident to his supervisor and a police report was filed. Based on our inquiry, we noted that TCICT did not have a theft policy in place during that time, and that TCICT had neither implemented controls nor provided any training as a result of the incident. As a result, we recommended TCICT to develop written policies and procedures to help prevent theft and fraud. And in our follow-up audit, we noted that TCICT now has a theft policy in place, which was approved by the Board of Supervisors. And because the theft policy was developed, we considered the recommendation to be implemented. Finding E, lack of proper approval on purchase orders. Based on our initial testing of 30 purchase orders of IT-related equipment, we identified 4 purchase orders that were purchased directly from the vendor without getting approval from TCICT. This finding is more of a reflection on IT, and this is the result of departments not including an IT-related commodity code, which would have routed the purchase orders through TCICT for their approval. And although not the responsibility of TCICT, we recommended TCICT help in creating a countywide policy that requires all departments to obtain proper approval from IT when making IT-related orders. In our follow-up audit, we noted that the TCICT director meets with the purchasing department on a monthly basis to discuss current policies and any needed changes. And the existing policies require all TCICT-related purchases to go through TCICT for review and approval. And because of this, we consider this recommendation to be implemented. Finding F, invoices not paid timely. In our initial audit, we identified 2 of 30 purchase orders tested, or 7% of the sample were not paid within 30 days of the invoice date. In our follow-up audit, in our test of 25 invoices, we identified 1 invoice, or 4% of the sample, that was not paid on time. And because of the decrease in the percentage of late payment, we considered the recommendation to be implemented.
Question, Mr. Chairman, what's the population of invoices? In other words, you took a sample, but how many thousands or hundreds do they process? That would be helpful information in the future.
Okay.
A sample is one thing, but if this is a department that is under strain to produce a lot of invoices or payment of invoices, that would be helpful information for us to know.
Okay.
I believe the amount is actually in the report. It usually is. That's something that we typically accept out when you do correct. That would be useful information.
Okay. We'll put that in the next report. Finding G, inadequate control in the receiving process. In our initial audit, we noted that TCICT did not have adequate segregation of duty in place in its receiving process. And without proper segregation of duties over the receiving process, the chances of theft occurring and going undetected are much greater. So as a result, we recommended TCICT designate a second person to verify orders received and storage of the assets. In our follow-up audit, we noted that TCICT updated and documented its current policies in writing, and they implemented review procedures to verify receipt of orders and storage of assets. And because of this, we consider the recommendation to be implemented. Finding H, lack of adequate documentation when asset is picked up. Based on our inquiry, we noted that TCICT's policies to obtain personal signature when orders are picked up from the warehouse. In our initial audit, we noted that this policy was not strictly followed. In our testing of 30 purchase orders, we identified 50% of the population were missing the required signatures. As a result, we recommended TCICT develop a form that will document the location of the asset and person who has the custody of the asset. In our follow-up audit, we determined that they're not following their policy. And in our test of purchase orders, all orders tested had required personal signature. And because of this, we consider the implementation to be implemented. Finding I, not all items in the warehouse are inventoried. In our initial audit, we noted that there were printers pending surplus stored in the warehouse that were not inventoried. In addition, although not as material, there were small leftover parts and pieces such as keyboards, mice, headset, monitor, and cables that were not inventoried. And as a result, we recommended TCICT develop a process of tracking these items in the warehouse. In our follow-up audit, we noted that they started an inventory spreadsheet listing all items, mostly surplus equipment that are stored in the warehouse. And because a process was developed to correct the finding, we would consider the recommendation to be implemented. Finding J, items for surplus sitting in the data center. In our initial audit, based on our observation during our visit to the data center in Government Plaza, there were several items sitting in a corner that should have been sent to either logistics or the purchasing department to be surplused. These items included mice, keyboards, phones, printers, and other equipment. And as a result, we recommended TCICT make sure that all the assets that are no longer needed be sent immediately to logistics or directly to purchasing for surplus processing. In our follow-up audit, we noted that TCICT updated its procedures for surplusing equipment. And additionally, we did not note any items that needed to be surplus during a recent visit to the data center. And because TCICT developed a process to correct this finding, we considered the recommendation to be implemented. Finding K, lack of policy on surplus items from outside TCICT. In our initial audit, we noted that TCICT did not have a policy on surplusing items belonging to other departments. In our inquiries, we noted that there were instances when TCICT personnel would take old equipment belonging to other departments to either logistics or purchasing for surplus processing without proper documentation. As a result, we recommended TCICT develop a policy for assets retrieved from other departments. In our follow-up audit, we noted that TCICT no longer surpluses equipment belonging to other departments, and that policy is documented in writing. And because of development of this process, to correct the finding, we consider the recommendation to be implemented. Finding L, lack of adequate controls in the warehouse. We noted that the warehouse was accessible to more staff than necessary and that camera and key card access reports were not actively monitored. Without adequate controls, there is increased chance of theft chance of theft occurring and going undetected. Because of this, we recommended TCICT to actively monitor cameras and key card access reports. In our follow-up audit, based on our inquiry of the current process, we noted that TCICT developed exception reports and implemented review processes to actively monitor alarm and keycard access. Because TCICT developed a process to correct the finding, we considered the recommendation to be implemented. Item M, lack of tracking and monitoring of county's ID-related assets. In our initial audit, of 30 IT-related assets, 6 assets could not be located. This finding deals with IT-related assets ordered by other departments that pass through TCICT procurement unit. You'll notice that this finding is similar to finding A. However, this one deals with IT-related assets, not necessarily assets over $5,000. So we recommended TCICT develop a countywide policy to more effectively or better track these ID-related assets. In our follow-up audit, we noted that TCICT is working on an asset management project that is planned to keep track of these ID-related assets. And again, as we mentioned in finding B, TCICT assigned a project manager dedicated solely to work on this project. The anticipated implementation date is June 2018. Because the project has not yet started, we determined that the recommendation is not implemented. Finding N, lack of tracking of software. In our initial audit, we noted that TCICT does not keep track of software installed on county laptops or computers. It's important to monitor computer software installation in order to stay in compliance because limits on installation and use are made under licensing agreements. And as a result, we recommended TCICT create a system to keep track of software licenses purchased and installed. In our follow-up audit, we noted that TCICT is working on asset management project that is planned to keep track of software purchased and installed. And again, as we mentioned, this project is anticipated to be completed in June 2018. And because the project has not yet started, we determined that the recommendation was not implemented. Finding O, lack of tracking of IT-related assets and access codes issued to TCICT employees. In our initial audit, we noted that TCICT did not keep track of what assets were issued or what access codes were given to its employees upon hire. So we recommended the use of desk inventory form as part of its onboarding and offboarding processes. In our follow-up audit, based on our inquiry of the current process, we noted that TCICT implemented an employee equipment checklist that is signed upon hire and on an annual basis. Because TCICT developed a process to correct the finding, we considered the recommendation to be implemented. And to summarize, once TCICT has completed their asset management project, which will keep track of, number 1, licenses installed and purchased, 2, IT-related assets ordered by other departments that pass through TCICT's procurement unit, and 3, TCICT's assets valued less than $5,000. The 3 findings, findings C, M, and N, will be considered implemented. Again, the anticipated completion date for this project is June 2018. The 4th finding, which is item A, is also anticipated to be completed by June 2018. And again, as we mentioned earlier, we will be conducting a second follow-up audit no sooner than 6 months to make sure that the 4 outstanding recommendations are implemented. And before I end, I'd like to thank Peg and Cheryl for all their assistance in the audit process and their dedication to strengthen the internal controls over the asset cycle. And that concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Well, I would just make a comment. I think that this has been very thorough, and I can't believe that there were up to O in findings for ICT. The only other department I've ever seen more findings in is in county council. So ICT has a lot of work to be done still, but I'm very confident they've been responsive to the majority of them up to this point. And I think given the amount of work that it's going to take to get the remainder completed, that's why they're pushing out to 2018. So look forward to that report once that's concluded, and I have every a bit of confidence that they will have all findings fully corrected by the 18th or June of 18. Any further questions or comments?
I did have, well, first of all, I want to say that the department head change out is really about the old department head.
Yeah. Kathleen is kind of old, I know. Go ahead, Deanne. You're good.
I'm just kind of curious when you do an audit. So there are all of these assets that haven't been inventoried. So how do you do that? Do you ask for some sort of all of the invoices for purchasing and sort of cross-check that, or is it just a matter of the department providing you with a list? I'm just curious how you actually audit that.
Yeah, well, we first ask if the process of the department, if there is a written policy, and then for assets like a spreadsheet that will list the items, and then from the spreadsheet we will test a sample that is a representative of the population, and then so for the assets that for assets that didn't have any tags, we go to the sites and look at the tags and make sure that that they're there. If not, then it's a finding. But of course, we ask for a reason.
Any further questions or comments from committee members or members of the public? All right, seeing none, Chair will entertain direction at this time.
For approval.
Have a motion by Member Britt, a second by Member Spada. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, the same. Motion passes unanimously. All right, next we're going to get to committee member and staff matters. Are there any items for consideration at this time?
I would just like to say, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to thank and compliment the Auditor's Office as well as the affected departments. The presentations were thorough and appreciated. I'd also like to thank the committee members for their engaged and constructive discussion, and I look forward to continued discussion with regard to these with regard to these matters. Thank you.
And I was just going to say under my section here, I'm really looking forward to the department head change report that the auditor's office is going to do for the auditor's office, which is really interesting because I feel like there's a conflict, an internal conflict there. So I hope that we're going to get maybe an outside auditor to come in and audit the auditor's office.
Indeed we have.
What's that?
Indeed we have.
Really?
Yes.
Okay. See, I was being sarcastic, but good for you. That's really great. And I hope it's not from Fresno County. Okay. They've taken quite a few of our employees here recently, so it's also a conflict. All right, seeing no other items, we will move on to Mr. Spada's favorite item on the agenda, and that is item 9, adjournment. We will adjourn now, and the committee will next meet on January 11th of 2018. And I hope everybody has a wonderful Halloween and holiday season, and we will see you in a few months. Thank you very much. Appreciate you attending today. Meeting is adjourned.